This is The Fifth Floor, at the heart of global storytelling with BBC journalists from all around the world. I'm your host, Farnak Amidi. Let me take you to Moldova. Moldova is a landlocked country sandwiched between Ukraine and Romania. It's one of Europe's poorest countries, and it gained independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. In September this year, Moldovans will vote for their new government. Like other ex-Soviet countries, Georgia, for example, Moldova is torn between pro-Western and pro-Russian factions, and pro-European politicians and observers are worried that Russia will be trying to influence the outcome of these upcoming elections. Why does Moldova matter to Vladimir Putin? And what will the election results mean for the region? Natasha Matuhina from BBC Monitoring is here to tell us more. Natasha, welcome to The Fifth Floor.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, Natasha, tell us more about Moldova. Who's in power at the moment and what is going on in the political scene of the country right now?
Farnak, you were right to say that Moldova is located between Romania, an EU and NATO country, and Ukraine, another former Soviet republic which is fighting a Russian invasion. So whatever happens in Moldova is defined by its geographic location. They say that geography writes history. So Moldova has a pro-European president, Maia Sandu, who was re-elected last year. And she is the main driving force behind Moldova's EU membership bid. She ran against 10 presidential candidates, of whom 8 were pro-Russian, backed by pro-Russian parties and promoting closer ties with Russia. She defeated Alexandru Stoyanoglu, who was backed by the major pro-Russian opposition party, the Party of Socialists. However, a president in Moldova has limited powers because Moldova is a parliamentary republic. So this year, Moldovans are going to elect their new parliament, which will appoint a new government. So in a way, this is a decisive moment for Moldovans because the parliament and government they elect will decide whether Moldova joins the EU by 2030, as its current pro-European government plans, or will its new pro-Russian government take it back in the Moscow's fold.
And Natasha, has there always been this kind of tension between the pro-Western and pro-Russian factions in the country?
Yes, I would say so, because since the end of the communist rule, which ended in 2009, 2 strong camps emerged in Moldova. One saw Moldova in Europe, and the other in regional blocs dominated by Russia. And the first pro-European president, and that was also Maia Sandu, was elected in Moldova in 2020, and Moldovans elected its truly pro-European parliament, which declared European integration as the country's strategic course and started taking concrete steps to achieve that goal in 2021. But Russia has never dropped plans to keep Moldova in its sphere of influence. So there is also a very strong group of a very vocal group of pro-Russian politicians and parties.
So how have things changed since the invasion of Ukraine back in 2022?
Moldova neighbors Ukraine, and Ukraine has always been one of Moldova's key trade partners. Moldova has had always depended on Russian gas supplies, and that gas came to Moldova through Ukraine. And the war, which started in 2022, ruined all logistics, trade ties between Moldova and Ukraine. Moldova faced a fresh economic crisis because it had to find new ways to get electricity and natural gas. In a way, the war came as a double whammy for Moldova because it started right after the COVID years, which also had profound impact on Moldovan economy.
And there's also a breakaway region at the border between Moldova and Ukraine. Can you explain what is going on there and what the situation is like and why that region matters so much?
Transnistria is a part of Moldova which borders Ukraine's Odessa region. Transnistria is an unrecognized, self-proclaimed enclave, seceded from Moldova in 1990. It has not been recognized internationally, and this international recognition and unification with Russia are declared by the separatist authorities as this enclave's strategic goals. Russia intervened in the hot phase of the conflict between Transnistria and Moldova in 1992 by sending its troops to that enclave. And since then, Russia has two military contingents stationed in Transnistria. Moldova has repeatedly called for their withdrawal. And Russia refuses to do this, claiming that the withdrawal of the troops will pave the way for a fresh armed conflict. And this region, this tiny stretch of land, is totally controlled by Russia. Russia has its law enforcement agencies. It totally controls Transnistria's media sector, and it is a factor in geopolitical situation in the region.
And why does it matter so much to Putin to have this strong influence in Moldova?
To answer this question, you need to have a look at the map, because this is because of Moldova's strategic geopolitical location. It borders an EU country, which is Romania. Romania is also a NATO country. Moldova has access to huge and very busy transport hub on the Danube River. And if Russia took control of Moldova, that would be a serious geopolitical gain.
So, Natasha, as part of your job, you look at the media landscape of Moldova. How do these political tensions and battles between pro-Russia and pro-West camps play out in the media?
This political divide in Moldovan society is reflected in Moldova's media sector, which is equally divided and which has two major components. The media is supportive of Moldova's European course and quite vocal and strong segment, which is supportive of the Kremlin and is funded by Russia.
Would you say that Russia's war on Ukraine has affected the media landscape of the country?
Yes, it did. Shortly after the start of the war, just days after the start of the invasion, the current pro-European government banned several pro-Russian websites which promoted the invasion and repeated the Kremlin's narratives. And the pro-Russian opposition accused the government of clamp down on media freedom, freedom of expression, while the pro-European government, in effect, tried to enforce media laws which Moldova has. They promote impartiality, balance, fact-checking, and the Moldovan broadcasting regulator decided to withdraw broadcasting licenses issued to 12 major TV channels, which were also either funded by Russia or linked to pro-Russian parties. And again, the regulator made it very clear why it resorted to this measure, because these channels violated the media laws, and the pro-Russian opposition used this for accusations of censorship, undemocratic practices in Moldova. The current pro-European government has long declared fighting disinformation and propaganda as one of its priorities, because there has been evidence of Russia's unprecedented interference in last year's presidential election and EU referendum. Russia has created networks of Telegram, TikTok channels, YouTube channels, which promoted Kremlin's narratives. And one of the trends that we spotted was that these media, social media, blamed Ukraine and the West for the war in Ukraine. And they were saying that the same will happen in Moldova if Moldova, like Ukraine, chooses a pro-European course of development. And by doing this, all these channels and accounts played on Moldova's natural fear of war. Ukraine is a neighbor, and residents of Moldova's southern regions can hear explosions when there are air raids on Ukraine's Odessa. That's a big seaport in Ukraine. Or they saw how many people, around like 100,000 people, fled from Ukraine to Moldova. And of course, this is one of the biggest divisive things in Moldova now. Many think that if they do not annoy Russia, if they just keep calm and go back to its Russian-dominated past, there will be no war.
So tell us, where do Moldovans mainly get their information and news from, and in what language?
Television remains one of the most popular sources of information for Moldovans. And this is a trend typical for many former Soviet countries. However, social media, Facebook, Telegram, TikTok, play an increasingly active role in information, and increasingly more Moldovans get news from social media. According to Moldovan laws, the media have to observe language quotas and to report in Moldova's official national language, which is Romanian. However, there is a quite large Russian-speaking community. And in recent years, since Maya Sandu was elected and Moldova got a pro-European government, the media supportive of Moldova's pro-European course figured out that they need to reach out to these Russian speakers to offer impartial and balanced information to them. And that's one of the big shifts that we have observed in recent years. The information is delivered not only in Romanian, but also in Russian. And many leading TV channels have news bulletins in Russian, entertainment programs, and current affairs programs in Russian. It's slightly different for the pro-Russian segment of the media sector because it's mainly in Russian, and they refuse Romanian as a state language.
When we're talking about pro-Russian propaganda, where do we see it being shared mostly?
Well, the social media is the main tool because Moldova has very good regulation and very good laws regulating TV and radio, but internet remains unregulated. There have been calls to introduce similar rules for online-based TV channels or radio stations, but there are many who say that internet should not be regulated.
And Natasha, you're monitoring the situation very closely in Moldova. What do you expect to see in the next few months?
Well, the big question is whether the current ruling pro-European party will manage to win a majority again. Because many opinion polls show that the share of undecided voters remains quite large. It's like 23-25%. So these undecided voters can have a final say in the outcome of the election.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Natasha Matuhina from BBC Monitoring.
I'm Farna Kamiti. The Fifth Floor team this week was
Alice Gioia
and
Caroline Ferguson.
Thanks for listening. You've been listening to The Documentary from the BBC World Service.